Okay, so it's 20 hours, and the very first Maxed Out Living webinar is on and has began in earnest. Um, One of the key things about this whole program is that Maxed Out Living is really about trying to get people to the point and trying to get us to the point where we begin to understand and realize that there is a way of being that we could be experiencing, and I'm using being as a verb. All right, there's a way of being that we could be experiencing that tends to enhance the very quality of our lives, that tends to enhance the very quality of our experience. And this way of being basically allows us to be able to get into a space where we are able to create the kind of experiences for ourselves, and we're able to make decisions on how it is that we're going to live our lives in the most potent and powerful way. And I'd like to thank everyone that's here already and everyone that's on their way. Um, Typically, unfortunately, not everybody's great at timekeeping, but I hope that insofar as this particular webinar goes, it will become a habit to be on time, because whether we have a me show, that's where I'm here alone, or a one show, or a no show, or an everybody show, we basically move on with it. Why? Because by creating the kind of energy that allows us to begin to move ourselves, our desires, our goals forward, by generating action, we create a fuel for the universe to use, if I may be so bold as to put it that way, to help us propel us to the next phase, okay, of our experience. So every time that we purposefully decide that we're going to do something, we begin to create a new and empowered space for ourselves, in which we create a powerful new force that enables us to propel ourselves forward. Now, let's talk about what maxed out living is, what it would translate to. It's an interesting phrase. I know it may not be something that people are familiar with, especially because in Zambia, we're not exactly familiar with the idea of a maxed out credit card unless we're exposed to other people's financial systems. To max out basically means to cause, or to reach, or to cause to reach the full extent or allowance. So it's really about getting to the point where you have reached the point where everything that could possibly be is, everything you could possibly be expressing is being expressed, everything you possibly could be bringing into being, you are bringing into being. In other words, it's really about living to the hilt. So when we talk about maxed out living, we're talking about, as I've already said, living to the hilt. That's what it's about, living to the maximum, where everything that could have been drawn out of you has been drawn out of you. Everything that could have been given by you has been given by you. Everything that could have been enjoyed by you has been enjoyed by you, and your life has been lived to the maximum. That's what maxed out living is all about. Now, when we talk about what that means in the context of this particular webinar, what we're saying is that we are looking at going beyond just existing. We're talking about getting past the point where you are content with just living your life as the individual that you are, in an isolated little cocoon, and not really expanding beyond the little boundaries and borders you've created for yourself in your mind. Okay, why am I talking about it, and why am I putting it this way? It may seem a little harsh, I know, but the truth is that many of us live our lives in limitation. Many of us live our lives circumscribed. Many of us live our lives with a little circle around ourselves. We have drawn borders around ourselves by which we confine ourselves, our thoughts, our actions, our ability to craft the kind of life that we want to craft for ourselves. And I'm using the word craft deliberately. You see, oftentimes people talk about creating life, and creating the life of your desire is one thing. Crafting takes time. All right. Crafting means that you're putting focus, you're putting attention, you are putting a little more energy and effort into making sure that the finer details of your life come out exactly the way that you want them to. So oftentimes, because of the fact that we circumscribe ourselves in these limited spaces, we create a situation where we are living lives at a fraction of our potential. Now, I know there's lots of motivational speakers and people who talk about potential and constantly speak of potential. And I know that it can be a bit of a tiring concept to hear about, especially when people don't exactly empower you with ways in which you could actually do something about it. But the truth is that most of us live at a fraction of our potential. And even when it comes to crafting our lives, most of us aren't actively crafting our lives. Most of us haven't gotten down to deciding the finer details of the life we want to live. We haven't gotten down to deciding how we want to live our lives, what we want to do as we're living our lives, how we want to experience the fullness of living. That is not clear to us. Now, what I mean when I talk about the fullness of living is really this. How many times have you thought about the kind of life that you would love to be living when you are old? Be honest here. It's not something we often do. And if we do, most of us just make it a vague thing and say something like, I would like to be okay. I'd like to be financially independent and not to be troubling my children. For most people, that is the biggest concern they have, is the effect that their old age will have on other people. How many people say, for example, when I'm 65, I'm going to be taking trips to the Bahamas twice a year because I can. I'm going to be enjoying sightseeing in different parts of the world if they have financial goals, or I'm going to be strong and fit and I'll be walking up this hill or that hill. Let's talk about a specific hill, the hill out on the farm, okay, comfortably. And I will be able to, if my children need it or my grandchildren need it, I'll be able to finance whatever it is that they desire. See, there's a difference there that you can see already between what we do most of the time and what I have given as an example of crafting. Now, crafting goes even further than that. It goes down to the very details of our lives. So have you gotten to the point where you're willing to craft your life? Because maxed out living means that every ounce of goodness, every gram of goodness has to have been extracted from your life by the time that you're done living it. Okay, so that means that by the time you're done living your life, by the time you've left this body, by the time you have exited this mortal plane, so to speak, you should have reached the point where every single thing, and I do mean every single thing that you could have done to enhance your living, every single thing that you could have done to add value to someone else's life, every single thing that you could have done to bring a sense of joy and a sense of wonder and a sense of beauty to everyone around you by virtue of your presence should have been done. Now, I know that it sounds like a tall order. And I know that it sounds like something that most people are not familiar with and most people are not able to do by default. And it is true. Most people are not able to do it by default, and the reason is simple. The reason is our mindset. The reason is our thinking. The reason is the patterns through which we live our lives every day. I'm going to tell you a bit about myself now, just in case anyone's wondering, okay, so here's Franklin, and all he says is come to this webinar, and who the hell is Franklin, right? I'm a certified master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. Okay, among other things. And I'll go through them one by one, and I'll tell you what neurolinguistic programming is all about. The premise of neurolinguistic programming is essentially that there are ways in which we frame our world and ways in which we create our reality and ways in which we limit ourselves that are based on the languaging we do within our beings. Languaging being the actual words we speak to ourselves, the actual thoughts we think and the way they are formed, the way we interpret things based on the way that we structure words and language in our own experience, and the way in which they are stored and used for further interpretation later on, so that they then set themselves in patterns, okay, based on the laziness that our brains have to constantly seek new meaning in everything. So basically, we being meaning making machines means that language is the primary way by which we form meaning. So when we talk about maxed out living, in the context of what I'm talking about here, what I'm saying is we are able to begin to transcend the boundaries of our experience by re-languaging our experience in our own beings, by speaking to ourselves in a new way, by changing the meanings of things within ourselves, by freeing ourselves from limiting beliefs that may be based on limited meanings that we have adopted over a period of time. And that's what most people have within themselves. That's what most people have as the basis of their experience, because it's what we are. That's what we do. We make meaning, we store meaning, we refer to that meaning often and as many times as we can to avoid having to make fresh meaning. All right. So it's just what we do by default. And so when we look at the kind of lives that most of us are living most of the time, our lives are based on this sense of a limited reality that is, and even then, let me qualify that. Yes, I'm talking about a limited reality, but more importantly than that, I'm talking about a limited map of reality. Why? Because reality, all this out here, is much bigger than we can comprehend. Our brains only take 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information per second, okay? So what this means is that we are able to take in and process just a limited amount of what this entire thing that we call reality is all about. Okay. Now you can imagine how much our brains have to filter everything that goes on around us in order to enable us to be able to make sense of life. Okay, otherwise we'd be overwhelmed. If I was constantly aware, for example, of my weight on the seat on which I'm sitting and the temperature of the air around me, and then an itch I have over here, and then a little discomfort I have over there, and then a sound that's coming from over there, and oh, somebody's calling me over there. And if I had to deal with that every single moment, I'd be overwhelmed. You'd be overwhelmed. So our brains are made in such a way, and our minds function in such a way that we filter things that come through to us. Everything gets filtered, and then we pick on this handful, 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information per second, okay, that we process. All right. And for the sake of efficiency, it also means that every time we go through experiences with people, we generalize certain things in order that we can cluster things together, so that we can say people, for example, that are from here do this, or people that are like this do that. Those kinds of generalizations form a part of our meaning-making structure, our filtration system to enable us to be able to deal with people on a day-to-day basis. Now, you can imagine what that means. That means also that no beliefs that you hold are actually real in the purest sense of the word. They happen to have been formed because certain conclusions were made about certain things that were useful at a certain point in time, and that froze themselves into a filter through which you now look at the world. So it could have happened when you were young. It could be that at some point when you were young, you experienced something that made you decide that the best way to interpret what had happened to you was that it meant this. All right. Your mom shouts at you after whatever's going on. It means I'm not loved. That's a belief that could come as a result of that. And then therefore, when you find yourself relating to other people later in life who are coming and giving you a certain attitude, all right, you take it, I'm not loved, or I'm being disrespected. Okay, perhaps on account of the fact that the very first time that something of that nature happened to you, you were actively disrespected. So that's how our language and our languaging and our filters and filtration system in our minds tends to craft a kind of bubble around us that limits our living. So part of what we're seeking to do in Maxed Out Living is to explore how is it that we can free ourselves from the limitations that we have placed ourselves under, so that we can cease to just exist, so we can cease just being here as humdrum, ordinary, who knows why I'm here type of human beings, to people that are living purposeful lives, having transcended all perceivable limitations, okay, who have unleashed their full world on a their full self on a waiting world that is starving for authenticity. What do I mean by this? I'm tired of fakers. I don't know about you, but fakers and me are done. I mean, we see them all the time. I put up a little post on my Facebook page a couple of weeks ago that garnered some very interesting reactions. And basically, what I said in that little thing was that we need to reel up. I was talking about how people have a tendency of going to all the trouble of making sure that they look a certain way and they look successful. And living in Lusaka and being aware of how things are in this part of the world, all right, because it's the one place in which I live and I can speak of with authority. I see so many people who look good, smell good, and who go out of their way to give the impression that all is going well for them and that they are having a beautiful, wonderful, amazing life, and yet who are broke or totally in debt or both. All right. Now, I'm not saying people should walk around looking like paupers. What I am saying is, why aren't people challenging themselves if that is what they really desire to be wealthy, to be comfortable, to have all the money they want, and to smell good, look good, and play the part of the benefactor or the blesser, whatever word would want to use? Why aren't they doing this from a space of authenticity? Why aren't people challenging themselves to be authentic? So that's one of the things that we are looking at in this Maxed Out Living webinar. We're trying to see how we can get to the point where we are digging deeper every week into what it means to be living with authenticity, what it means to be doing more than just existing, what it means to basically become a whole person that manifests the fullness of what they are on the inside, and that has broken through the limitations that start with these limiting beliefs that almost everyone has, for example, about whether or not they can make money or whether or not they're deserving of success, and how we can all push through and all become better. Because one of the things that's really important about this, and I think that it's important to say right now, is when you look at the Western world and why the Western world is where it is, it's where it is because minds have been put to work. All kinds of minds have been put to work. If you are an engineer, you're put to work. If you are a lawnmower guy, you're put to work. And if you are an inventor, you're put to work doing exactly what you excel at doing. Now, in our country, one of the saddest things is that people are going to spend all their time going out and getting drunk. They'll spend all their time going out to braais. They will spend all their time posing. Yeah, we know the look, we know the feel. And they'll spend all their time doing all these things on the outside that are not really adding value to what we are as a society. We have technologies now that we can leverage. We have this platform, for example. Here we are doing the very first Maxed Out Living webinar. Okay, and it's funny because when it dawned on me that I hadn't taken the time to build a platform that leveraged this space that we're in now, where I could literally share with a whole lot of people in the comfort of their homes, in the comfort of my own home, all right, I could share what's going on in my mind so as to be able to help people move into more empowered spaces in their own minds. Because like I said, having been trained in neurolinguistic programming, I know exactly how to do that. I decided, okay, it's time. It's time this got done. It's time that we moved past the point of constantly just waiting, waiting for someone to turn the key so that people can walk out of the prison gates, okay, free. Why are we waiting? Why aren't you taking that into your own hands, and why aren't you doing it yourself? So that's what dawned on me, and that's how I found myself thinking it was time that Maxed Out Living started as a webinar, because it can be done. All right, and here we are doing it. All right. So the point that I'm trying to get at here is that out in the West, they recognize and they realize the importance of tapping into minds. It's something that we don't know here yet. Okay. Now, just because I happen to be the person that's running this thing does not mean that I have the best mind of them all. It just means I'm the one guy who decided that he was going to get up and do this. All right. And everybody that's a part of this call week after week, everyone that decides to join this webinar week after week, brings their own mind to this. Everyone brings their own being to it, and everyone contributes to what is typically called the mastermind. And here's what I'm going to talk about. Another thing I wanted to talk about today, which is why the coming together. All right. In science, and also in philosophy and in metaphysics and in all kinds of disciplines, the word synergy is used to mean various things, but essentially the same thing. All right. It has various applications, but essentially means the same thing. And the word synergy is all about what happens when you bring one together with one. Right? And how 1 plus 1 does not equal, as the mathematicians say, 2, but 1 plus 1 equals 3. How's that? That's because there's you, there's me, there's we. Each one of these creates its own set of dynamics. Each one of these creates its own energy, and each one brings its energy into the mix so that by the time that they've all come together, the combined power of you and I is far much more than the power you would have had on my own, far much more than the power I'd have had on my own, and far much more than the combination of these two powers standing next to each other. The thing that makes the difference is when these powers or energies begin to intermingle and flow together and create a more powerful force that gives us a third force that allows us to be able to do what we want to do. Now, why am I emphasizing this? I'm emphasizing this because what we're looking at doing when we talk about maxed out living is we're talking about getting us through thresholds, getting us through barriers, getting us to break through to the next level of empowerment in our lives. I can't do this alone. You can't do it on your own. It's that simple. It will take the combined energy of you and I to be able to move us forward in a way that moves you forward and moves me forward, but in an exponential way that gets us further than either one of us would have gotten on our own. And that's the importance of forums and things such as this, okay? That's the importance of having webinars such as this. They're not a common thing in Zambia, and I hope that that will change because we now have the internet, we now have smart devices, we now have computers, we buy data, and most people will spend their time watching stupid YouTube videos and won't take the time to do things that will expand their minds and get them where they want to get. I'm not going to be treading on eggshells in this webinar. I'm not going to be the nice guy that's trying to make everyone feel comfortable and make everyone feel it's okay for us to be going where we're going the way we've been going when it's not. Okay? It's not been okay. We need to start arresting the rot that's happening. And a lot of it is brain rot. People are feeding off social media and falling into disruptive and destructive patterns of thought. Remember, I mentioned patterns earlier on, and I will go into a whole lot more detail when necessary, because this is not supposed to be a coaching session on neuro-linguistic programming, so I will not teach it like that per se, but I will from time to time share principles, and I will from time to time share exercises and share tips on things that can be done to unlock the patterns in our brains that keep us locked into limitation. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we need to arrest the brain rot. I'm calling it the brain rot. And why am I calling it brain rot? Well, basically, if someone's going to spend all their time watching stupid YouTube videos or just sharing stuff on and liking and whatnot on Facebook that is not taking them anywhere, all right, then they're essentially rotting their brain. Okay, now here's what I mean. You've often heard, if not often, you may have heard at some point, the statement that is summarized as use it or lose it, all right? Our mental powers are delicate. Yes, they are powerful and they are able to do amazing things, but they're also delicate. And falling into patterns is easy. That's what our minds do. That is what they are created to do, to find, create, and fall into patterns. Okay, now you can imagine a situation where rather than allowing oneself to challenge oneself to grow, and therefore instead of moving oneself into space where they begin to take charge of their space with volition and they begin to think critically about where they want to go and they begin to craft their lives, people allow themselves to be told what to like. Okay, they find themselves being okay with being shown what to enjoy, and basically they find themselves being okay with having their thought life directed to them by these random things that come into their social media stream. Okay, they allow their truth to be dictated by what's on the news channel, or worse still, what's on the social media channel. What do you think happens to the powers of the mind? What do you think happens to the powers of deduction, to be able to deduce, to think through and extract meaning? All right. What do you think happens to the powers of induction? All right. To be able to get something new and put it into a space. But what do you think happens to the power or even the desire to dream? We're almost out of time, but I'm going to mention this because, there's a lot of studies that have shown how social media has made more people miserable than ever before, and how it's made more people depressed than have ever been depressed before. All right. And how social media is literally damaging the fabric of society, apart from the fact that people are failing to interact with each other face to face anymore. I mean, it's crazy. You're in a space, in a social space, and everyone's got their phone. All right. I mean, I find myself grateful sometimes for the blessings in disguise that dog my steps, so to speak, when I find myself oftentimes for various interesting circumstances without a smartphone. And when I'm in that space, I actually find myself feeling happier, feeling freer, feeling less hounded by the world. Okay, because I'm able to maintain the integrity of my mind space. I'm able to maintain the integrity of my personal space, of my heart space, my emotional space. All right, but the studies that I was referring to basically were pointing out how we are at a point in history where we are in trouble because most people are basically relying for their sense of well-being on a device and on social media and on the internet, okay, and things like that. And these things are taking away from our soul as the human species. Now, the reason I'm pointing out this out is really this, okay, that we need to start leveraging these platforms to do good for ourselves. I'm not saying they're evil. I'm saying we need to get smart about them. Okay. So what I'm saying is that there are opportunities for us to create and leverage platforms, that will enable us to reach each other in powerful ways, that will enable us to share with each other in powerful ways, that will enable us to help each other reach higher and help us create synergies that move us all forward. Those opportunities exist, and that's what this platform is here to allow us to do. So the one request I'm going to make of you, just one request, all right? Yes, this webinar is free, all right? And we will stick to dealing with empowerment issues. And occasionally, like I said in one of the videos I posted about it, if you quote any of them, we will talk about ways in which we can leverage additional platforms that include things like business platforms and money-making platforms and things like that that are based on the same principles. We will see all these things at some point. But the thing that I'm going to ask of you right now is, if you know somebody, all right, let me start by telling you what I do. As a result of what I do in the therapy work that I do, as a result of what I do in the coaching work that I do, people are liberated. People are made to feel empowered and able to take charge of their lives again. People find themselves being able to focus with clarity. People find themselves able to go down in new directions that they didn't realize they had the power to go down. People find themselves, even people that thought that they had not a single bone of enterprise in their bodies, find themselves knowing that they can go out there and earn a living for themselves, running a business of their own. As a result of what I do, people feel empowered and able to create and craft their lives. So I'm looking for people who want to take charge of their lives, who want to craft their lives, who want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Who do you know? Invite them to the next webinar, and we'll see you then. Have a super time. We're out of time, so I gotta go now. Thanks, and bye.